Ever wonder why you keep having those reoccurring nightmares or dreams of your ex? Or maybe you find yourself trying to escape from some really scary scenario in your sleep. In this episode, our favorite depth psychologist, Melissa Kim Corter, is back, and she is helping us decode the deeper meaning behind our dreams and nightmares, way beyond the obvious themes. We dive into the power of timing. Yep, think of astrology. What is happening in the planets when that dream is happening for you? We also talk about the significance of symbols, identifying unfinished business, and why those vivid dreams leave us with the lingering emotions the next day. Melissa shares her transformative 4-step process to help you finally decode those dreams that won't leave you alone. And as a bonus, of course, Melissa takes us through an intimate dream decoding session with me as her subject. It's raw, emotional, and deeply insightful. Spoiler alert, we both cry. It's a beautiful journey into the subconscious mind, and by the end, you will be itching to decode your own dreams. If you are new here, you're listening to the How We Get Through podcast, a place for you to feel connected through deep and meaningful conversations with healers from all over the world. I'm your host, Jen, a licensed therapist and founder and CEO of the How We Get Through app, and my mission is to bring you affordable and diverse therapy resources to help you get through the hard stuff, all in one place and at your own pace. Welcome to the How We Get Through community. Hello, welcome back to the How We Get Through podcast. We have Melissa Kim Corter again on the podcast. Melissa, thanks for being here.
Hello, Jen. So excited. Thanks for having me back. We had such a great conversation the first time. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, it was so good. And again, I told you before we started, I had so many people reach out and be like, that shadow one was so good. I'm starting a shadow journal. So I thought it would be so great to have you again to talk about nightmares and dreams, especially again, we're in October. This will air in October. Right now it's October. But thinking about, and there's a lot of like scary stuff around us. And so how can we kind of feel empowered by these like subconscious things that are happening to us when we're sleeping and we're not asking for them?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. And so, Melissa, just fill us in real quick on your background. If anybody didn't listen to the shadow episode, please go listen to that. You don't have to listen to that one before this one. But Melissa, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Well, thanks again. I'm so excited to be here. So my name is Melissa Kim Corter. I'm a depth psychologist. I'm a best-selling author, and I love to teach, speak, and write about all things dark side of the personality. And so sometimes that's looking through the lens of fairy tales, film, forensics, but helping people find value in this hidden part of us that we all have.
Love it. Love it. Okay, so when we talk about dreams and nightmares, do we need to talk about them separately first? Or
no,
okay.
Actually, like, this is a great lead-in because it really, if we think about like even just asking that question, what makes the difference between a dream or a nightmare? Because really it's kind of perception, right? If you think about it, it's like, well, a dream can have a heightened sense of emotion or intensity. A dream might have a certain narrative that's playing out. A dream might have intense images, symbols, things that are arising as we're in this altered state. But then nightmares, same kind of a thing. It's like intense imagery, a theme, a narrative. So really, it's kind of like, well, what makes the difference between the two? And just based on client feedback and my own perception around that, I would say it's how we view it. And I like to look for the unfinished business because I feel like that's one of the big discerning points is if there's a nightmare, there's usually some kind of unfinished business within us, where a dream has that too, but it's usually less emotion or less intensity. Mm-hmm. But fear often is one of the things I hear that is that discerning point for people. Anxiety, fear, dread, these senses that overwhelm the nervous system and the mind, that usually is one of the things that is kind of like, okay, I feel like I had a nightmare, not just a typical dream.
Yeah. And it's so interesting as you're talking, I've had an experience both from what I would call a nightmare and also a dream. It was a little startling, but it wasn't as scary as the other one. And I woke up both times like, And
Right.
yeah, and that's terrifying.
So that's important you said that, because I would call that, so that in a dream state, when we come out of it, one of the things we look for is a somatic reaction, which is a body-based reaction. So the gasp or the
Heart racing,
abrupt, way we wake up, or it's all of that is also can be a part of that process. So the before, not so much, but the during the dream state and then right after can tell us a lot about the quality of what's happening in the psyche.
Yeah. And why is it important to like pay attention to our dreams or our nightmares? Like, why would we do that?
I love this question because I feel like it's something we're not taught. When we're young, when we're children, we usually have this enchanted sort of quality. We have these experiences about magic and hope and fun and play, and we're told to dream and pretend and all of that. And then we hit a certain age, and it's kind of like, oh, you can't do that anymore because that's childish, that's immature. So the imagination, the dream state, is really reliant on us paying attention to symbols. And these symbols are important because the way they emerge through the dream state is to tell us something. So what I like to say is it's important to listen to our dreams, to our nightmares, because it's a form of communication. And it's a form of communication from the depths of your psyche. So again, for those of you that didn't hear the first episode, we talked a little bit about the shadow and these different parts of the mind. And so the psyche is the Greek word for soul. And essentially, it is the all-knowing part of us. It's the part of us that's very wise and connected. And yet there's all these other pieces, too, within the psyche that work together. But what happens is when we're awake, we are in a higher brainwave state, not higher as in better, but just more active. Whereas when we're sleeping, we're in a lower brainwave state. And because the psyche is communicating to us, to the conscious part of us, the mind, it's going to do that in a language that isn't necessarily straightforward, which is symbolic, which is metaphorical. And so that's why our dreams are often a little strange, maybe obscure or hazy. Sometimes we feel like we get snippets of things. It's rare that a dream plays out with a narrative from start to finish that makes perfect sense or seems like it's communicating in a way where we instantly get it. We can do that, but often we're doing that with other senses, feeling, intuition. So the psyche doesn't necessarily communicate the way we do with language where we're trying to get a point across and say, this is what we're trying to say, and that we deliver that message. The psyche's like, feeling, here's this color, here's this texture, here's this random person you haven't thought about in 40 years in your dream. And it's going to do this in order to get us to pay attention with the conscious mind while we're awake to put these pieces together. The reason we dream in the first place, it isn't just to process emotion or energy, although that does happen too, but it is to help us understand what it is we're not paying attention to or what we're not quite aware of while we're awake. So this nighttime world of symbol and dreams and metaphor, it's really working on our behalf as an ally to say, hey, there's just more to you. And if you're feeling stuck or if you're feeling uncertain, here's what you can do. Here's a little something that might help you. So I think of it that way, whether it's a dream or a nightmare, it's always working on our behalf to communicate some type of information to us.
Love that. Just like the shadow is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Is there certain times of the night where they mean different things? Like if you dream or have a nightmare closer to waking up, that means a certain thing? Or can you dream anytime? Do you have to be in REM sleep? I'm not a sleep expert. I don't know.
Sure. Honestly, I'm not either.
I don't know either.
I have heard that the closer you are to waking, like the time shortly before, especially like 5 a.m., 6 a.m. for a lot of us, I have heard that is usually when we find ourselves in the deepest sleep, in that REM state. I believe that to be true on some level, but not necessarily through research or anything, but more from my own experience of dreams and keeping a journal of dreams for a long time, working with clients who have dream journals, there is something to be said about that those dreams that are closest to us right before we wake up. But at the same time, what I think is also a possibility is maybe we are dreaming other essential dreams, yet it's really difficult if it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, or, if we're sleeping, wake up at midnight or something. We really are so quick to go right back to sleep and not necessarily get up and write it out. So my sense around that too is we could be losing some of those dreams, or some of that, those types of dreams that are coming to us around that for that reason, that we're overtired, we're not as rested, we're right in maybe in the beginning of our dream cycle, sleep cycle. And so I think that plays a bit of a role in the process too for people.
Yeah. Can you talk about the history about like decoding dreams and interpreting dreams on the like psychological level?
Sure. It's interesting. And when I say this, I'm going to just say, take what resonates and leave the rest, because I know there's so many different opinions
magical.
on them. Yeah. So it's like, feel into it, what works for you. I'm someone that I really struggle with our use of dream dictionaries and symbolism, in the sense where we want to go look for a meaning that someone else has kind of determined and says, every time a pencil shows up in your dream, it means this, you know, or every time you lose this one specific tooth on this side of your face, it means this thing. And I'm kind of like, okay, that's interesting, but how do we know we're not just following some lunatic's guidance or somebody else who, like, maybe that's really brilliant, but was meant for them? So I'm not against it, but I will say it's so important that we listen to our own bodies, that we learn how to analyze our own dreams first. And it's okay to consult with people who can help reflect some possibilities back to you. But the idea is your psyche's presenting it. And so if we go to a dream journal first, or a dream dictionary, I should say, the same applies with like animal totems and things like that. If we go to these different sources first, that's fun and that's wonderful. And you're getting these filters of someone else's experience, where your psyche might have nothing to do with what is already presented, what the research shows on a certain item, a repetitive pattern or theme. So what I recommend is learn how to do it for yourself first, and then fill in some layers. If you're really stuck, if you're having a dream where there's a symbol that's repeating, or a object that's showing up, or a figure, and you just feel kind of blocked, then I say, research, but still engage your entire psyche in the process, which means let yourself be led to the different materials. And then it has more of this synchronistic quality of, oh my gosh, I found this random thing and it said this about this, aspect that showed up in my dream, and I just had chills all through my body. That's very different. When we land on something like that and there's that synchronistic response, that's how you can kind of gauge and say, okay, I'm onto something. There's part of me responding here. But if you're reading a meaning out of a book or something else and it feels kind of flat, or it could be really interesting, but maybe doesn't resonate or doesn't strike a chord for you, I'd say there's probably something else to investigate. So when it comes to the interpretation of dreams, I feel like because your psyche is presenting it, it also happens to be the most richest resource you can have in decoding it, or sort of unpacking what the symbolism is.
I love that. But I think that's, again, giving your power back, because there's sometimes I'm like Googling that and I'm like, I don't know, or like, or it's like something very morbid and like, oh, I don't, that's terrible. That's great.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. What about déjà vu in the dream space and being able not to like predict the future, but maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I love this question, and I'll just be honest and say, don't know. I'm not really sure from like a complete place of understanding what it is. I've had that experience. I love that experience. I even like it when it's a little eerie and kind of unsettling, where you're just like, what was that? There's a lot of different thoughts and theories on this. And I'd say probably the one that most closely aligns. And again, I'm still a little skeptical. I'm not quite sure. But the thing I'd say that probably closely aligns the most for me is this idea that we're on the right path. You know, if we're having this dream, this in a way where it's like there's certain, my husband does this all the time. He will have these dreams that are so oddly specific about details. They're short, they're snippets, and then it plays out exactly the way he thought it was going to happen. Wow. And I see that déjà vu as an alignment to say, guess what? Keep going. You're doing the right thing. I also have noticed those déjà vu moments, and this may or may not resonate, and I'm curious about your experience with this. My déjà vu moments often come with something I either need validation for, where I'm like, I really don't know. What do I do? Fork in the road kind of moment. Or something where there's a lot of emotion and maybe I'm struggling or I'm feeling like, wow, things are really tough, really difficult, and I don't know how to navigate this. That's usually when I will have that type of déjà vu sensation, and it'll force me to kind of sit back like, wow, okay, that was really intense, and I can't explain how that feeling that washes over you, like it's really gripping. But I'll pause and I'll be with that feeling usually and go, okay, I just, there's something there that makes me think some other part of me knows. And some other part of me maybe is showing me more, because the ego can only see a limited view of everything. So if we keep in mind that this part of us, the ego, is sort of responsible for what we see between the hidden parts of us and the world, not even just within ourselves, but even what's around us. It's kind of like that flashlight that's determining how much we see within that one singular beam. The more we do this type of, all different types of work, all this kind of stuff we're talking about, personal development, dream work, shadow work, we turn that laser focus flashlight into a dimmer switch, and it starts to kind of shift how much comes into our view. So déjà vu to me sometimes feels like that dimmer switch is just kicking up a few notches to go, look, there's so much more here, and you're tapped into something greater than you. Keep trusting. So I wouldn't have put that together until you asked that, but that's what just came to me.
I love that. Yeah. It's so interesting because the déjà vu that I've had, I think I take it so literal. Like, it's the weird feeling like, oh, wait, I've been here before. I've been here before.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy. And you're like, wait, I think, and it's like trying to put the pieces together. And I take it so literal, the situation that's going on, which feels so minor. You know, it's like I'm like writing my name on a paper for my kid or something, like something so minor. So I love the idea of like taking back of like, what is the emotion around this? What else can be here for you? Because I think even sometimes it can kind of dysregulate me a little bit, like, you know, and being able to breathe into that and be like, okay, well, what is here, you know, instead of being like, oh, okay, that was cool. Or sometimes with clients, you know, because I'm a therapist and I hold a lot of information in my brain, and all of this work that I've been doing this last year, I think has really opened up a lot of stuff. Yeah. And I think to myself, I'm like, did I already know this? Or am I asking you again? Like, there's this weird space in between that I have to really kind of ground myself in of like, did I know this information or is this new? And I think that's that like cool experience to be in, and also can be really ungrounding if it feels fearful. Just like with shadow work, right? If I have the lens of like, this is bad, then it becomes like, ugh. But I love that reframe of, whoa, what else is here for me as this is happening?
Ah, so good. Well, you just kind of sparked this other thought around this is this term recognizing. If we break it down, it's recognizing, right? Just even that simple like, am I remembering something that was in my consciousness, or is it this is tying in for me as I'm listening to you share is in shadow. One of the things we work with in shadow work is this idea that it isn't just holding all the tough stuff, the ugly stuff, the parts of us we hate and we loathe. And of course, some of that is there, but also it's things that haven't been integrated fully in us. So I wonder, and I don't know this to be true, I'm just curious, I'm just going to throw it out there. Like, I wonder if there's maybe even something there within the unconscious kind of percolating. And then all of a sudden the ego goes, I'll accept that. And so it rises up and it meets the ego, and then it's like recognition, right? So I wonder if there is this, like, is that what resonance is? Is it we're hearing something out here for the first time and it's coming in and we're responding to that? Or are we hearing something out here that's reminding us of something that's deeper, that's just coming up again? So I don't know, but you just kind of sparked some interesting thoughts on that.
I love that. And the curiosity around that to have, like, to hold those and experiment with them,
Right? Yeah. The mystery.
Yeah. Okay, so I know we shouldn't be saying if you're having this dream, it means this, but can we do that?
Yes.
Everyone needs to do their own, discernment. But I've polled a couple of my friends and people online, and there's some recurring dreams about ex-partners that come up a lot. And so I'm curious of what that means. And I think they're it's always it depends. What are they doing? What's the, there's probably so much more context I imagine needs to happen. But even with some clients, I'm dreaming about my ex again. Does this mean I need to go back to him? And I'm like, let's slow down.
Right.
Why'd we leave in the first place?
Right. Let's recognize that.
Yeah, exactly. But that's that jarring thing of I thought I processed, or I thought this person was gone. Yeah. But they keep showing up in my subconscious.
Yes. I love this. So it's exactly what you said. There's so many different ways to relate to that type of material, but I can give a few different examples of maybe how I would approach it. So I know this is probably going to sound a little funny to think about, but the timing I would look at. And I'm not a professional astrologer or anything like that. But what I have noticed is, we all know we are intimately connected with this universe and with each other. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that there's certain cycles where things are closer to consciousness that rise up and things like that. So one of the things I would look at is timing. And specifically, I would look at the period of Mercury retrograde.
Yeah.
Because it has a tendency to affect the way that things from our past recirculate to be completed for our healing, for our expansion. So sometimes the dream during a Mercury retrograde phase will contain elements of the past that can help to say, this is resurfacing. I am not necessarily meant to proceed with this or go back to this, but how do I move forward integrating the wisdom of this, the healing of this? Is there something unfinished here? And if there is, rarely is it something in that sense that we have to go to the person with. It's often something unfinished within us where we can look at the person and sit with, what are the qualities? What do I see when I think of them? And write out those qualities. What is the pattern here? Did I have a pattern with this person? And if you start to see past the literal, which is really all of what the dream work is, you start to get past the face of the person and you start reading the energy and it'll reveal itself. So remember too that the psyche is self-regulating. It wants to bring us into balance. Dreams are some of the ways we compensate for that. We will unconsciously bring these things up to be worked through, that language, that communication. So if we ask, what could this be communicating to me instead of the literal, I need to go talk to him or her? That can release some of the stress and the pressure. What do I do about this relationship? And working with something emotionally, psychologically, energetically in that way, believe it or not, can also lead to pretty profound shifts that make decision-making clearer. So first, if we work at it in this symbolic way and say, what are the qualities, the traits, the pattern, the energy? How did I feel when I had the dream? What was the landscape? What was the time? Was I with this person at that time? Are they older? Are they younger? There's a lot of detail we would sort of, first, I would say to gather all your details and write it out. Sometimes by just kind of doing this and remembering that in the dream state, we're also projecting onto these forms, these objects, these metaphors, these aspects, the things that are showing up, we're projecting onto them to get us to see the meaning, to get the ego to go, oh, I can identify that. So if we can remember that as we're thinking of that ex-partner that's showing up in the dream, we can say, how is it possible that this is a part of me that I've denied, rejected, suppressed? The quality, not the person, but the quality is there's something there. Because oftentimes relationships are already trying to get us to do that anyway. A lot of our relationships are all about learning how to really go through this individuation process, which is the unfolding of self, the integration of these different aspects of who we are. So that's one thing I would say is like, look at the detail past the actual literal person. And from there, trust yourself. You'll be guided in different ways based on what the response is when you feel into that detail, when you sort of begin writing about it, thinking about it, feeling into it. The next piece that you need to know will surface in that process.
Mm-hmm. I think about that with the repeating dreams of ex-partners, but then also, which I've seen so many TikToks of, like, my husband cheated on me and told me whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then I woke up and,
yes,
and was mad at him for the rest of the day. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's that feeling. I also think too, it's like there can be which is so crazy when you have a dream and then you're left with that feeling throughout the day.
Yes, it's residual. It's that somatic response. It stays with you. That's a doorway. So I would say that's a doorway in. And usually it's a doorway in through the sensation, through the feeling. And I work with, there's so many different ways that we respond to impactful moments, which is my code word for trauma. But impactful
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Right? It helps a little bit because not everybody's a trauma expert or trauma informed. And so if we say impact, a lot of us can be like, oh yeah, that was impactful for me, or that left a mark, emotionally, physically, whatever. But the doorway. So we think of these moments, that residual feeling is a doorway into some deeper guidance, some other information. I work with the 5 main, what I call core wounds. And so I'll just tell you what they are really quick. I won't go into all of them because it's a whole other conversation, but this will give some insight just around that residual feeling in the beginning of us learning how to track and trace that. So the 5 wounds that I've identified that I work with are rejection, abandonment, betrayal, violation, and humiliation. Those things often we'll just hear one and be like, ugh, cringe, or a combination of them. And we know on a deep level if which or all of them we've experienced. In the dream state, if we're waking up and it's usually a cheating scenario, I rarely will say to someone, be careful, right? It's like an alarmist sort of situation. Instead, what I would do is go to that feeling. It's, again, unfinished business in a sense. It doesn't mean that our partner isn't or is, but what it can show us is what's unfinished within the nervous system itself. And it's borrowing someone else, the image of someone else, to show us, to say, hey, this is coming up. And this is actually, funny enough, another one that surfaces during Mercury retrograde, or today's an eclipse, or at the time of this recording, I should say. There's a lunar eclipse. Those are very heavily charged times, which are highly beneficial for us, which bring these things to the surface. But what I would look at is say, okay, the energy of that aftermath, what is that? What's really under that? At first, we're angry and we're like, want to slap the person, and they're like,
how
what?
Could you?
Because you dreamed? You're mad at me for real? But we've all had that feeling. We know that feeling. But if we sink a little deeper, it's like, is that betrayal? Is that the energy of betrayal? Is that the energy of being abandoned or rejected, humiliated, what have you, on some level? And then what you can do is, once you kind of write, and I'm always writing about this. Like every one of my clients has like a love-hate relationship with journaling. They roll their eyes like, please,
You're
again,
like, write it
you're
down.
going to tell me to journal. Like, come on.
Yeah.
But really, it's the fastest conduit into our emotions. That's accessible for us when we're alone or trying to process, on our own. But you can use that feeling to say, okay, this is a doorway. Our wounds are apertures. They are doorways into things. They're openings into things. And that doesn't mean we are a victim, and we don't have to use the language of like being disempowered around the wound. It's more of an investigative type of energy. We're like detectives going into this stuff, right? And if we can come at it from that perspective and say, when was the last time I remember this feeling? In childhood. And how old was I? What did it feel like? What is the story that's associated with that? The present moment dream or nightmare is often trying to show us that unfinished business, right? The things that are still kind of circulating throughout the body, soma, tissue, nervous system, and coming out in this way. Our partners are different ways. They're human beings with their own, stuff, but they often will reflect these different things for us. And it's so easy for us to become angry with people for what we feel like they've done to us, whether it's a wake or a dream state, instead of being like, wow, what are they revealing for me? What's being revealed for me? So there's something empowering about that too, to say, hey, if this is a real legit concern of my partner cheating on me, well, we're going to face that. But let's try this first, because usually that gives you a little more clarity to get a little deeper into the truth of what's going on there. And then if there is some type of actual thing that needs to be dealt with, in the realm of the waking life, that will give you a little more clarity. But it's so easy to just go into paranoia or obsession over it because it feels so uncomfortable. But if we can stay with that discomfort and powerfully channel that discomfort onto the page of the journal, we get to know ourselves so much more clearly. We can start exposing these different parts of us that are showing up in this really difficult, uncomfortable scenario.
Yeah, that's so good. And it's so interesting because when I've had that experience of the feeling staying, it like is all day. And so I think it is that like conscious coming forward in some way. The somatic is like, oh no, you need to look at this. Like this is what's creepy about it, is that it's staying with you. So do you want to do something about that? I mean, in a loving, gentle way, we could talk to ourselves, but it's just so interesting. Like it's staying for a reason, or however it needs to kind of show up. But how you can kind of be curious with it.
Yeah. That, when you say that, the word that comes to me is vulnerability. So these dreams can show us these vulnerabilities to say, maybe there's a part of us that this is our big button trigger. This is our our fear of deception.
Worst fear.
Yeah. Our fear of future things it can be unfinished from the past, but it can also be unfinished in the sense of a part of us looking out, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for our joy to be squashed, waiting for some terrible thing to happen. Because for some of us, we don't understand our protective mechanisms or the way that we respond, and how we will sometimes unknowingly create distance in our relationships and our interactions so that we're not as vulnerable to being hurt again or for the first time or whatever. So I think those dreams can also kind of like, it's like it just rips off the Band-Aid and is like, there's no hiding from this. Here we go.
Yeah. I think in this one experience, it was like felt preemptive. Like I know this will happen in the future because it will naturally occur,
Right.
So what are my feelings about that now? And it was just so interesting. I'm like, oh, I have to be okay with this at some point, or I have to grieve or start to grieve that now, where I thought I'd be okay with that. But now I'm like, oh, it came full force. Be like, you should look at this first.
Wow.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah. It's a powerful teacher in that way.
Yeah.
And I love that you could pay attention to it, because I think that's one of the hardest things for us to do is go, okay, I'm going to be with this. I'm going to find my way of leaning into it or working with it, because it can be so ominous, especially for those of us that are hardwired for like logic,
Yeah.
It's like, oh, the body, what? Emotion.
Yeah.
How do we what do you even do? It doesn't necessarily, but the thing I like to remind people is this is one of the reasons that dreams are helpful, because it's trying to give you a form. It's really trying to give a form to something that might be formless, in that way.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, what about dreams about like you're being chased, you're going to get killed, someone breaks into your house, drowning? I don't know if that's in that, but
yeah. So nightmares.
What does that mean?
These are my favorite. This is where my devilish dark side comes out a little more, because I love these so much. I just got done recording an episode where I was blending personal development with true crime. So this is my area.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So dreams nightmares where we're having these crazy things, I call it being haunted on some level, right? We're haunted on some level. Again, it's unfinished business. So somebody's chasing us. We're drowning. I have somebody once told me they saw themselves jump off a cliff and land and kind of survive, but not really. Very intense, graphic imagery that involves being harmed, fear of being harmed, self-harm. A lot of times it can be someone chasing us where there's another figure in the dream, but sometimes it can be nature. It can be like the cliff, the water, fire. There's different elements that come in. So just like anything else, I would really have the client first start with, what is this pattern? Now, and I don't mean the sense of tell me what it is from start to finish, because it's usually what they don't know yet is, I don't know what the pattern is. I don't know why this is circulating. So it's more of like, tell me the pattern of movement. And it might be like running, drowning, chasing, so that usually there's some kind of movement going on or a fear of that movement. And so that would be one way I would work with it. But if we take something specific like drowning, for example, you've got different things. You have location, may or may not be significant to the person. I've had people share actually 2 drowning dreams, very different. One was like in a lake. They were not familiar with the territory whatsoever, which was kind of interesting. But what that also told us in the analysis of the dream is that location, it wasn't about location finding the place. Sometimes that's an important detail in the dream. And often if we find ourselves dreaming terrible things, sometimes the comfort of our childhood shows up in the dream by bringing us back to a space where it felt safe for us. So there's some people where a nightmare unfolds, but in their childhood home or something like that. So a lot of times the psyche is also trying to balance and compensate in that way of saying, here's this thing, we need to look at this, but I'm going to bring you here so that it feels familiar, which might get your curiosity going and you want to figure this out. So location's important. If other people are present or not is important. Believe it or not, in the one situation where it was a pool and it wasn't the lake, there were other people in the dream and they weren't doing anything about it. In this particular client's dream, it was about being witnessed. It wasn't the literal act of the water and the drowning. It's the fact that she felt invisible in her life. And here she's overwhelmed, which is water can be overwhelmed and emotion. A lot of times it's symbolic of that type of thing. But then we can look at how that specifically plays out for us. But there were witnesses that were not helping, that didn't seem to care. And there were people there she recognized, people there she didn't recognize. And interestingly, when we started to break down the dream, the ones that she didn't recognize didn't matter. The ones that she recognized, she was so disappointed, thinking, these are people so close to me. They did nothing. They did nothing. Wow. And it wasn't really about the literal people. It was about the pattern at play within her, where she never felt like she belonged in the family. And she never really spoke her truth or showed up in a way that felt authentic. And so this dream was showing up. There was so many things that came out of that specific dream for that client. But the environment we're in, it sounds kind of silly, but the type of water. Is it clear? Is it dark and murky? Is it familiar? Is it not just in a location we might recognize, but a location like period of time? how old are we in this dream? I had a water drown. It wasn't a drowning dream, but I was being chased by a tsunami. And
Oof.
I was like 7 or 8 years old when the dream started. And this dream, maybe even younger than that, actually. But it carried on for a couple of years. And every time the wave went to like crush my family and crush me, I would wake up. But there was this weird residual sense, like somehow I felt like I got away. Like like that was the weird thing. I would wake up and feel like I escaped this tsunami. Well, in real life and waking life, I was one of the people, I would say, in my family that did a lot of work to break a lot of ancestral patterns and generational trauma type of things. So there's so many different ways to look at these things, like I'm saying, and you can start with these basic sort of ideas of the biggest thing that is important to do is to come right into that symbolic attitude to say, not literally, I'm not going to think of this as in I'm going to drown or there's going to be a problem here. I'm going to look at this symbolically. What could the water represent? What's happening as I'm drowning? Am I feeling? And this is going to be hard because it can be traumatizing to get really specific about these details. So the more we can write out how we feel and the emotion and all of that in the journal initially starts to diffuse them so that we can investigate the details with a little less emotion and get a little bit closer to what this symbolism might be trying to show us. But those are all different things I would look at, including what am I wearing? What is there a temperature, a season? So just like if you were to show up at a friend's house and they would say to you, I really need your help. I lost my keys. There's things you would ask your friend, right? There would be things you would do to help them retrace their steps. Dream work is kind of similar. You keep asking questions. You keep letting it unfold. You keep kind of just tracing these invisible threads to see, because you, the participant or the therapist or the analyst with the client together, you create this field. And so you're both in each other's psyches, which means you as the therapist have access to the parts that the client dreamed of that they're trying to unlock. So together you can really make some progress on revealing these things. It's important to know it's not fast work. And it's one of the most frustrating things when it comes to dreams is people want an answer right away. Every now and then when you analyze a dream, you can get some instant feedback and feel like, oh my gosh, that was right on target, or I feel so much relief. I connected these pieces. And it can take months sometimes before something happens and the connections are made. Dreams also connect to synchronicity in our waking life. So in your dream state, you have all these things showing you different elements. And then in your waking life, if you're paying attention, it's eerie, but all of a sudden somebody will talk about their dream or water or drowning or something that will like sort of trigger you in a way to go, oh my gosh, that was just so uncanny that they said that thing and I had this dream. And it's the universe sort of and your psyche going, pay attention here. I'm bringing you pieces. It's your work to connect the dots and to know that there's something deeper going on here to organize all of this on your behalf.
Yeah. I had a dream recently that it was raining and I was like, I went to a doctor's appointment, but then I was the wrong one. So I got in my car and I start driving. I feel like I was in like Portland or Oregon. I don't know. It was like earthy. It wasn't Orange County, California. And
Right.
then all of a sudden I like hit a huge puddle of water, like a body of water, like a lake. But it would just like all of a sudden came. And I remember my car sinking and I'm just like, find the window, just find the window, just find the window. And I'm like, I'm not even looking at the window. I'm like just searching for it in my hand. And I got out. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, are my kids in the car? Oh no, thank God my kids aren't in the car. And that was just like so crazy. And then you like wake up but it just was like, I think, you can be as open as you want to your own interpretations. And I think the more open and curious you are, because I was making connections as you were talking of like, I can survive this. I'm going to be so you guys, it's eclipse. What is it? New moon eclipse. I'm like so emotional.
Oh, it's an emotional shit show is what it is. Can I say that?
Yes. Fucking sucks. Yes.
It's intense.
Yeah, but I just like, I was like, I can survive this,
Yeah.
and my kids aren't here. Like they're okay. They're safe.
Right.
And so,
and here's something that came to me. Can I share what came to me while you were
yes,
starting
yeah.
to dream? And when you went to look for the windows with your hands, that's your soul saying, we're going to find everything you need. Everything you need will come to you. It doesn't come from what you see with your eyes. The type of sight that we need to navigate darkness, challenge, indecision comes from the depths of who we are. Your body instinctively was like, I can feel through the window. I don't need to see it with my eyes. I know it's there. Does that resonate?
No, I'm just crying.
Because it's a movie.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. And I do feel that. I like trust that knowing, and it's also just so scary and shocking as it's happening. So it's like holding both of those. But I love that. I would have never thought about that. But it did feel like that sense of calm a little bit. Like, just find the window. You got it. Like, you know what to do in this situation.
Yes.
Breathe. Do it. And then you'll be fine.
The sinking of the vehicle in the water is very symbolic of a descent. A lot of us, to navigate these different things, this is where it's misinterpreted a lot by those of us that I'm trying to be delicate when I say this, because there's a lot of overtones that can cause fear for us. And I'm not anti-religion. I think it's a beautiful thing for people. And we have to be cautious because sometimes our interpretation, if it's colored with this religious context, can create more fear. But the reason I'm saying that is the descent is like the sinking down and in. But some of us, if there is like association with the underworld, meaning hell and this terrible thing, we're going to feel more fear instead of, no, actually this descent, this down and in is about our humanity, and really just, it's pulling us into something. It's actually pulling us in. Like, if we think of your dream, this body of water. So I'm even thinking about the emotional body because of the way you worded that. It was like body of water. You didn't just say like the lake, the puddle was, the puddle became the ocean, or something like that. It was like this body of water. So our language, even when we're describing our own dreams, is extremely symbolic, and it takes us just being open and intuitive to that. So that to me also says, I'm willing to go into this, to do this thing, to find my way through. I'm a mother. I love my children. They're not here. I feel relief over that. And because this is my journey. This is my journey. And they'll have their own, but for now, it's me in the depths of this. And I can do this. And my spirit's guiding me through this.
I love that. I mean, this isn't the first time I've cried on the podcast. I think I do it openly.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful.
But yeah, thank you for that. That really means a lot.
Absolutely.
I also joke, like, sometimes I just have people on so I can have my own therapy and stuff.
Right?
So
catharsis,
I'm feeling great.
So we need it. We need it.
Yeah,
I think it's a beautiful thing, because I think through your expression of your experience, your emotion, it's reminding people it's safe to be human, and that you can be such an incredible, powerful woman, mother, therapist, all the stuff. And that emotion just really is so beautifully, it's like it brings it all out. It doesn't take away from it. It doesn't chip away or dismantle it. It doesn't disempower you. It's quite the opposite. And so I think it's such a valuable thing for people who are listening and watching to see, because often that part is shielded from things. We're kind of like, it's almost like separated. I can't even tell you how many of these podcasts and things I've done where it's like things like that are edited out, and I'm always kind of like, no, that's going to help someone so much to resonate with the humanity of this pivotal moment. So I'm always like, my clients will joke with me and be like, wow, Melissa, I've been talking to you for 6 minutes and I haven't thrown up or cried yet. And at first I was like, damn, that's harsh. Yeah. Then I realized, there's some people you just get around them. And I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but I have this one mentor I could just walk into her space and look at her, and it just starts pouring out of me because she's such a safe person, such a safe person. She holds you without even having to physically hold you. I just can't explain it, but there's something like that that's just so, when you find those people, hold on to them, you know, because this world can be really challenging. And even though we have this psyche guiding us and these beautiful inner world of our dreams and all of these things, our humanity just wants to remind us too that like we're not alone and we're not doing this alone. So we need people to kind of reflect that in this very human, physical way too.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I like cry because it's real, and you know, I'm not here. Oh, Jen's crying again this week, you know, like it is what it is because it's real life, you know, and I can't live a double life forever, and I don't want to here. And so thank you for letting me and creating safety for me.
Yeah. And tears are truth, right? Tears are truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Ugh, that's for sure. Should tweet that. Get that on a t-shirt.
Right.
Okay. So we talked about some interpretations of dreams. I want to know what it looks like to work with someone. Like how do you know when you need to work with someone in interpreting your dreams? And then what is that like sessions, or if it takes a long time, what does that actually look like?
Sure. It's funny because it's a little ominous because it can be an ongoing process. So the path that I'm going down in my studies and my training is to become a Jungian analyst. The reason I'm sharing this is because there's so many different types of therapy and processing and support and psychotherapy and all these different modalities and tools, and all of them are fabulous. When it comes to dreams, the richest experience for me personally as a client, as a patient, has been through working with an analyst. And essentially it's because they have these certain things that they do that are a little different than the typical world of dream work that I've experienced with other people. So there isn't a timeline which you could say, okay, it's this many sessions or this is going to be how it works, which kind of blew my mind, by the way, when I found out about an analysis and analyst. Some of these people, the average relationship is like 10 years.
Yeah.
So you want to be working with somebody for so long. But it's not this idea, like some types of therapy, it's like, oh, I'm broken, let me go in to, fix my problem. Analysts, it's more like, we're going to have a relationship. I'm going to reflect things to you, and we're going to integrate things, and you're going to do the same for me. It's really this co-creative thing. So in a dream state, it really depends on what's moving through you with a particular dream. It is something where you could have a call with somebody one time and kind of go over some basics and say, here's what I'm getting. But then what happens is when things move up into conscious awareness, just like you were experiencing, right, the emotion that's moving through, you're going to continue to process this dream, that moment now, even if you had that dream 10 years ago, right? It's going to keep unfolding. So it depends on, do we need to be safely psychologically held through that? Can we do that on our own? I think that's a personal choice. I'm pretty good at that. So I'm like, help me dig in, reflect the crazy shit, and then I'm pretty good at like, okay, now I'm on my own and I can sift through it all. But it depends on the person and the graphic nature of it, because I'll be honest and say we all know that there's some terrible dreams that are really haunting and extremely graphic. And that could take some time to break down, especially if it does involve our children or other things. Especially, I worked with a lot of dreams that involve accidents and things that are terrifying, and they plague the parent for a while, or themselves, just for obvious reasons. And it isn't the literalness of it. It's helping process and regulate the nervous system through that. But there's different ways to go about it. I say look for an analyst or look for someone that understands, and again, this is just my personal preference, but Jungian dream work specifically.
Okay.
Because if you work with people who practice psychotherapy and do dream work, you might get a Freudian person, which is amazing, but it's a very different it's a different perspective. So it's always like, see what you resonate with. The reason I love the analyst route is because this type of psychology embraces the idea that there is this hidden part of us called the unconscious. Some people refer to it as the subconscious. Any discipline that leaves that part of us out, for me personally, doesn't feel complete. So when you're thinking about all this, that would be one of the questions I would ask is, in your work, what do you think about the unconscious or subconscious? Do you believe in that part? And that can help you very quickly sort of like go, oh, this person is like, no, I don't believe in that. I only believe in, what our thoughts create. Okay, that's cool. And I would say then they may not be as well attuned to the dream world. But there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it. And I don't know if I just answered your question or not. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. You know what? I used to work with someone who was getting her training, and she would have to see people 3 times a week. Is that what would be the cadence of doing dream work? Does it differ? Is it once a week?
Oh, honestly, it's up to the client. So the way that I work with people, I have a couple different ways. One of the things that people will do with me is they either come in through a program. So I have a shadow work program I work with, which is about 6 weeks, 6 phone calls, 6 modules of material. But it's kind of geared around the different processes of the psyche, how it works. And then with each phone call we have, we kind of reflect on these different elements. In between, they will dream usually. And that's where some of the dreams or nightmares come in. Another way to go about it is I'll just work with someone based on the amount of time they have. I haven't really had anybody request any more than once a week, but I also am right now working with people who I would say are, have the capacity to, do a lot of things and are would be considered average or would be considered someone who doesn't need a lot of extra support. Maybe they're not suffering from some type of like psychosis or neurosis or something else where you're going to need more attention and more and the dream state in those people, like in those types of individuals, can be very rich and vivid, and it's a whole other layer of things. I'd say once a week is probably pretty good for the average person. That could even be a lot. I have some clients I work with that 2 weeks is nice. It just really depends. I think it's looking at our needs. Some people once a week, they feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have enough time. It's like everything, there was so much that went on in this session and now processing it. And here I'm talking to you again so soon. I didn't even have time to do the homework and stuff. And then I have other people where it's like once every 2 weeks, they feel like a year has passed. So much has gone on. So it is a very personal choice. And, it just depends on, it's hard to say because it really is such a unique process for each person. But sometimes also what I've done is I've set it up where I work with the client on, here's how I'm going to give you some of the steps of analysis when it comes to dream analysis, because I'm not technically a Jungian analyst at this point. So when I'm doing these sessions with people, I'm still doing this through the lens of like a clinical hypnotherapist. Because even as a depth psychologist, I am not a licensed psychotherapist. So I don't go into that realm of therapy with people. But the analysis part is more like reflecting. Dream analysis is more like reflecting and giving ideas around these things. And so in that type of session, I can say, okay, here's the 4 ways that you would be able to interpret your dream or learn how to interpret your dream. Depends on each of us, because again, some of us like to have more support around steps and working through things, and other people are like, just give me what I got to know, and I'll process or work through, and then I'll reach out to you when I'm feeling stuck or having a concern. So it's all over the place.
Yeah. Do you want to take us through those 4 steps if people feel like they want to try that? And then I think that's a good jumping off point of like, oh, I need support around this, or this feels like doable for me.
Excellent. Absolutely. Yeah, that's actually a great way to lead into it, because you can sort of gauge based on, oh, okay, those are the steps. Let me feel into that. Is this something I feel comfortable, safe working through on my own, or do I need some more support? So there's many, many things that go into this. I'm going to give you these 4 steps, and please just know these are very much like each one of these has so much information that you can really draw on from your dream. But the first step for every single person, regardless, is write out the whole dream. And I mean the whole thing. Some dreams are only 10 seconds long, but we're not just focusing on like the man came to the car. That could be the narrative of your story, of your dream, is like, I just remember there was this man standing by the car, and you write that down. But when you write out your dream, write it all out. What did you see? What did you feel? What did you hear? Somatically, what did you feel in your body? Can you remember? And if you can't remember, you don't know, that's okay. But you're just sort of like checking the boxes to see if there's just a little more and a little more and a little more. This is going to give you the most clarity on trying to put it all together. After you kind of go through, okay, what did you see, sense, feel, hear? And what did you somatically experience? The next layer of the first part of writing it all out is what thoughts or feelings or sensations came up as you were waking when you're coming out of the dream. I consider all of that first layer of just write it all down. Even if it's rambling, it doesn't have to be in order. Most dreams, the elements aren't in an order that's really significant anyway. Sometimes they can be, but it's more about you're getting the symbols that are popping up. So that's part one, start to finish, write the whole thing. Next thing we do is we look for something called a central image. A central image is essentially the thing that has the most energy, the most emotional charge for you. So for example, you write out the dream, and we're using this silly example of like a man, came to the car window or something. Well, was it the car that felt really off or different, or not even in a dream? It doesn't have to be a nightmare, right? It just might be getting your attention. Was there something weird, unique, different about the car that stands out, or the man, the look in his face, the feeling in your body? So again, you're just next level of what has the most charge, and you write about that. So we call that the central image. So that's step two. Some people are going to revisit each one of these stages that I'm kind of mentioning. You might revisit over and over for the same dream to draw out more detail. So if you're like, well, the man and the car both feel charged to me, start with one, go through the whole process, come back into the same dream and say, okay, now when I'm thinking about this other detail, just like your dream, the water, the car, the window, everything had charge to it. But if we start breaking that down, we can get more clarity. So that's step two, is the central image. What has the most energy? The third is engaging with the central image. This is the thing that is, it's going to ask you to really let yourself be with the imagination. Because you're going to imagine engaging with this central image. So sometimes we call this guided imagery. Sometimes we call this Jungian analysts Jungian analysis, they'll call it active imagination, where you actively engage in an imagination way with the image. So if I were to imagine that I'm engaging with a man who came to the window, I might close my eyes. I might pretend he's right there. I might ask myself, what do I feel about him being there? I might ask him, who are you? What are you here to tell me? And this is all done out of your dream state. You're awake, you're imagining, you're feeling into it, you're creatively approaching those dream images to see what else is there. And we want to open to the idea that the psyche is speaking to us. So when we hear or sense or feel things, it's real. So if all of a sudden the man says, I'm here to show you something that you have been denying within yourself, or the man might say something like, check your mailbox.
Yeah.
You never know, right? It could be some random thing. Look under your bed, pay your phone bill. I have no idea. But there's all these different things. So when we engage with these images, again, we don't want to take what they're saying literally, but we write down that material because you never know. So that's the third step, is writing down all these important, relevant themes, engaging with them. And if it doesn't have an emotional charge, you don't have to focus on the detail. You don't have to engage in this active imagination process with everything. Because if you write out your dream and you're like, there's like 30 different things or people or circumstances in this, go with the most charge. Where do you feel drawn to? And trust that. And then if you're missing something, or if it just feels like you haven't quite, hit it, you keep kind of scanning in your mind, trying to remember the different parts of your dream, then look at your writing. Something will jump out and get your attention. But the very last step, honestly, is just putting these pieces together. Okay, I wrote it all out. I paid attention to the central image. I engage with the central image. What is going on here? Is there anything I'm feeling, sensing, seeing as symbolic? Did I have an insight or awareness? Is there a synchronistic event that happened? So this whole process, you can do this in an hour or two, but the other part of putting the pieces together, this is what could take weeks, where you have to go out in the life, go to work, do your thing before something drops in, before something rises up from your consciousness to go, aha, oh my gosh, I got it. But that usually will happen after we move through these phases. So first phase was write it out. Second was look for the central image or images. Third was engage with the image through active imagination. And then fourth is putting the pieces together. And that's essentially what we would do. It's just, you could take any of these and you could spend 2 hours on the first part, or 5 minutes, or 2 hours on the third part. So it's a very unique process depending on the person.
I love that. Well, and it was almost like a mini session of me crying and doing that. And I think what was so valuable of your interpretations of it, like it felt like, oh, that's a big missing piece for me. That my soul, or like my inner knowing, was there. And I'm like, oh, that feels empowering. That feels like I almost can reframe the dream and pull what I really needed from that, again, as a reminder of who I am, even if the circumstance feels scary. I'm going to cry again.
Oh, I love that. I love that for you. And that's really it, right? It's even in these scary things, we can find this sense of something greater than us.
Yeah.
I had this client, I'm so grateful she lets me share this it's a very short experience, but she was going through a really difficult time. I would call it a dark night of the soul. And I'll never forget what came out of my mouth, because I never said it before, never considered it, but we were kind of like, we were at the end of the session and just sort of reflecting on some of the things that came up. And I was sharing a little personal detail, because sometimes I'll do that. If there's a story that's relevant to the client situation, I might share something to say, hey, it's because it can spark something for them.
Yeah.
And we were at the end of this session, and we were just talking about how difficult it is when you're going through these challenging times, and when you're someone who's really intuitive and connected to that part of you, that soulful part, and all of a sudden it feels like it just disappears. It's almost as if it just went away and abandoned you. It feels terrible. And what I was getting in that moment of recognizing that within myself, and then sort of like honoring her experience of that too, my intuition, my soul, whatever you want to call it, showed me this image. And it was me, not literally, but just in this metaphorical way, me sitting on the floor with my back against a door. And I'm just like crying, and I'm in it. I'm in the thick of the emotion and all the stuff. And I'm looking around, and it's not completely black, but it's pretty dark in the room. And I hear a whisper through the door, and it's my soul, and it's on the other side. And it's like, I haven't left you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here, but this is the space where for right now you need to be to get to know yourself. Ugh, it's like overwhelming. I want to cry just even saying that.
Well, I'm doing it for you, okay? That is so beautiful.
We both like start crying together on this call. And I was like, I had never expressed that feeling of like, I know I'm not alone.
Yeah.
But there's moments where it's almost like we're forced to think we are to rediscover that connection in different ways. And later, sometimes we see it and go, oh my gosh, I really wasn't. But how weird, I felt so cut off from that. So it was like my soul saying, it's like it's ear to the door, like a loving parent that's like, I know you're in there crying in your crib. I can't come rescue you because this is needed. But I'm here. I'm with you. And it was just like that. And I've never forgotten that moment.
That's so beautiful.
When I think of people going through dark times or unfathomable experiences, I work a lot with death and tragedy, and I've had so many clients and different people go through the most horrific things, and there's just some things we can't even make soulful if we wanted to. It's just not possible. But what I do think is possible is we can always find that sense of, as terrible as this is, I know I can find my personal meaning, not assigning it this beautiful quality to say this terrible thing has purpose, but more like my resiliency, my getting through that has meaning for me. And that image of there's my soul at the door, letting me be here, almost like an act of love, even though we get so angry and mad and we feel like we're being punished. It's not. It takes so much restraint. Can you imagine? It's almost like, imagine that somebody's going through an addiction, right? And they're healing and they're dealing with the core wounds and the substance, they're detoxing it and they just want it so bad and you can't give it to them. It's an act of love to not give them what they want in that moment. I feel like there's something synchronistically odd and weird and coincidental about this type of thing that we're talking about with that too.
Yeah, because I think it's that like searching for self that you, whether we signed up for it or not, is part of like this deepening of self, you know? And then you choose whether or not you want to deepen and you want to know yourself more, or you cut yourself off emotionally and say, I can't even hear anything on the other side of the door, or nothing exists there, you know? And there's times where it feels like that. But I do think it is like I'm being shaped currently, and I have a knowing that everything is going to be okay and fine and better. But the moment in the current is like, that's the hardest part, is connecting that the soul's on the other side. But then it also, there's been times where I'm like very upset and crying, and then I like kind of connect. I always go up like with my hand, but I like connect to like my higher self, and there's this, I get this weird like calming.
Oh, and that's like your descent in the car. It's like the descent.
Yes. And I'm like, and I literally cannot conjure the tears because it's so calming. And I'm like, all right,
here we
don't need that. Yeah. Or sometimes I think, which maybe this is fucked up, but sometimes I think, oh, I wanted to experience how painful this was as a human. Like I wanted to, this gut wrenching pain. And I'm like, here it is. This is it.
I get that too. There's that sense of, and I think that just depends, on our belief systems and our, which I think it's lovely and interesting that we have all of these different things, but this idea of like, maybe on some level I did choose this. And I feel like some people could be like, oh my gosh, I would never. But I get what you're saying, because what I feel in that is different. It's like, no, if I on some level chose this, that means it's because I know I can do it. A part of me knows that I will get through this, that there's something here for me. Can I share like a little story quick? Like a million stories. I had a friend call me this week, and I can't go into specific details because there's like an ongoing investigation in this really weird sort of police situation. But I had a friend call, and she, we were just kind of catching up a little bit. And I'm like, how was your week? And she was like, weird, let me tell you. And she kind of launches into some really bizarre details. But the reason this feels so significant, because we're talking about these darker places and the dark night of the soul. And when we feel like, we're just going through all of this stuff. And so there was a really terrible thing that had occurred, and somebody was on their way to her home, and she was expecting them, and they didn't show up right away. And she was like, oh, it's kind of odd. And then she gets a phone call, and they're all distraught, and they end up, getting to her house. And there was I can't really sugarcoat this. They found a dead body, like on the side of the road. And
the person going to their house found a dead body? Oh, okay.
Found the dead body on their way
to her. Is this by your hometown? Because last time you talked a lot about dead bodies in your hometown. It's actually
in a whole other state.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. These things come to me though. Like these people talk about all these things. So she was like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. And they were really shooken up by the whole thing. And she's like, well, we need to call the police. She starts like the voice of reason, like there's things we should probably do here. So they call the police, and the police are like, we're on our way. And obviously they want to talk to all of them and question them. My friend she looks to her husband and she says, I need to go over there. And her husband's like, you're not going to the dead body. What are you talking about? And she was like, there's a bus stop there. Oh, this makes me emotional. There's a bus stop there. And there's going to be children that are going to be going to that bus stop. And I'm going to go so that I can make sure that they don't have to see this.
Wow.
So she gets in her car, she drives and positions her vehicle in a way where nobody can see the situation, and without disturbing the crime scene. And she just sat and waited. And then the police show up and they're like, "Are you a first responder?" And she's like, "No." And they're like, "Why did you do that?" And she said, I felt like it was the right thing to do. I just felt like if I could stop more harm from being done in the situation, right? However, she didn't say it. That's how I'm like reflecting on what she told me, that I remember how she said it. And I just remember being overwhelmed with such love and appreciation for my friend. I was like, there's people that are being perfectly positioned in the darkest of places. Now you got me. Now
I'm crying again.
Right? This is the episode of tears.
Yes.
But every time we've like, and that's an unfathomable thing, right? To just encounter such a difficult, dark part of humanity. Like, that doesn't happen on just a regular basis for most of us. And this person, this friend of mine, has been involved in things like this, where she just happens to be the person. She would not think this. She's the sweetest, kindest, most loving person. And she just has this fierceness that when it comes down to it, she's there. She's perfectly positioned because some part of her knows, this is my job right now. My job right now is to prevent further harm. And this is the way I bring my light into this darkness. And I think it serves us to remember there's a lot of people doing those things in different ways that we don't always see. Yeah. And it's the small little moments where our intuition is just like, hey, go here. Because you know what? Everybody else was opposite direction. They want to go the opposite direction, away from the pain, away from the ugliness, away from the horrible thing. And her instinct was go here as the protector. Like, oh my gosh, there's something so powerful about that really shook me. And it's funny because none of this was in her. She was not at all thinking that what she had done was heroic or amazing. She was just like, it's the right thing to do. And I'm like, and if she would have chosen not to go, if she would have chosen not to go be around that or see that, that would have been completely acceptable too, right? But it's just this idea that sometimes people will do things that we don't even comprehend, and they're helping to shield us from further harm and pain. And I know in such a tragic situation, it's difficult because we know a life was lost. At the end of the day, we know that to be true. And maybe just from this one person engaging with this intuitive part of them that said, just go here. We don't know how many were prevented from unnecessary harm. And there's something refreshing in all of that for me that I hold on to when I hear these things.
Yeah. Hope. And I think that, where there's darkness, light also exists. And it's almost like the polarities were at play there and can be just as strong, like be just as equal in a time of need. And so I don't know if you've heard, when tragedy strikes, like look for the helpers. Have you ever heard that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it kind of reminds me of.
That's it. Like for the helpers. And you just never know. And we never know when we're being called to something. I had, oddly enough, in the same week, another person had reached out. It was a very delicate situation. So I'm not going to go into the details of that, but it was just like the reminder of, oh my gosh, these individuals are just doing things that are so easy to overlook, and yet they have such a huge significance in the result of the outcome. And I think it's so humbling to think about that. Like sometimes we want these grand roles, jobs, responsibilities. Like I'm a light worker, or I'm a this, or I'm a that, or I'm going to be a firefighter, and all of that's needed and important. But I also think it's just so incredibly rich to think that everyday people are answering the call of their intuition, saying, just go here. You don't need to know why. Just go here. Follow this thing. Listen to this. I mean, never know the ripple effect that has, but I believe in that deeply.
I love that. Melissa, thank you again for such a beautiful show. Thank you for letting me cry, which I know you would. Thank you for your tears. It's a lunar
Absolutely.
eclipse. We're recording this in September, so it's lunar eclipse, new lunar moon. I don't know, you guys. It's intense.
Lunar, yeah.
Melissa, you also have a new book coming out, correct?
Yes, I do.
Talk about that.
I can't share the title yet because we're still kind of working out the details, and it's going to be quite some time, but it will be the end of September. Actually, I should say the end of October, beginning of November in 2025 is when it will actually
That's
be
writing
available.
a book for you. Yeah.
It's I just submitted the manuscript this week to editing, and
Awesome.
the editor takes some time, and then it's like a huge publishing process. But so excited, and it's all about shadow work and in a creative way, working with intense themes, shocker, and fairy tales to help us see things within ourselves in these stories, so that we can work on these different parts that are difficult to encounter.
Is it ready for pre-order yet?
No, not yet.
Is that how it works?
It's still very early in the beginning, of the editing process, and we don't even have the full. We have a working title, but it's still in its infancy. Oh, the other thing I want to say, I'm so excited about. The publisher is incredible, and so they actually partner me with an illustrator that's going to be doing. So it's going to be like hardcover images where the imagery is going to be matched with the themes and the words. So it's going to be a really beautiful book. I can't even wait.
Yeah. Yay. Well, I'll put your Instagram again on the show notes and your website if you want to work with Melissa, but follow her on Instagram so you can keep in touch with when that book launches.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Wow, what an episode. You guys, usually I don't listen to episodes again, but I had to because it was just so good. If you love the episode, please let us know by giving us a review up on Apple Podcasts, as that helps our little show grow. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next time.